Sitrep as follows.
Transaction approved.
No, they're here already.
Tommy,
Since last night's declaration of martial law, soldiers are moving in to secure key areas in all major
In response to UN presence in Minneapolis.
Last night I dreamt about how things were.
Of every enemy of the state!
And then I woke up here.
I simply cannot state it enough just how thankful my wife and myself are for you, our YouTube family, and our online community. All of you out there who have been so encouraging to us, sending us great messages and emails, encouraging us, leaving great comments. We are all learning so much from you. And, you know, all the other Christian truthers out there who are trying to spread the message of truth. We are really in a spiritual battle for the minds and hearts and souls for people who just do not know what is happening. Even many Christians are unaware as to what is taking place. And, you know, I'm just so thankful that we are all part of the army of our Father Yahweh, the army of Yeshua. We are trying to spread the truth as much as possible. And this particular video is an inspiration of three people. I have been in a great conversation with one of my fellow YouTubers and subscribers. He goes by the name of El Zazo, fellow Canadian brother, and we have been discussing quite a lot of these false flag events that have been taking place all over the world, literally on a weekly basis, maybe even more. And, you know, it really reminded me of this movie Gray State that was slated to come out, I believe, at least a year or so ago. And the writer and producer of this movie, who was named David Crowley, he was killed, okay? And of course, the official story is something else, but I really believe that he was exposing something, and he was probably getting a little too close for comfort to the establishment who are responsible for what is truly going on in the world. So as we look into this, I really believe we are going to see, you know, just exactly what is happening here and what we are being prepared for. The Vigilant Citizen had a great article regarding the death of this man, David Crowley. It's called "The Director of an Anti-New World Order Movie Was Found Dead in His Home in Suspicious Circumstances." David Crowley, the director of Gray State, a movie about the New World Order and the occult mind state of the elites, was found dead in his home along with his wife and young daughter. The Dakota County Sheriff's Office stated that the deaths appeared suspicious. Okay, and even as I read the story, it seemed very suspicious to me. David Crowley wrote and directed Gray State, an unfinished movie about the militarization of police, the imposition of martial law, high-tech surveillance, RFID chips, and the occult mind state behind it all. And just so you know, this article was from January 28, 2015. I'm sorry I forgot to point that out. The movie's Facebook page states that the story is about a wounded veteran who leads the insurgency against a corrupt government after nationwide martial law has been declared. Okay, and again, there's a trailer here which you saw at the beginning. And again, one of the inspirations for this video. In a 2012 InfoWars interview, Crowley stated that he felt it was his responsibility to spread the message about the possibility of a United States decline in wake of a New World Order. The interview describes the film as a highly anticipated independent film envisioning a brutal police state, martial law crackdown, complete with biometric identification, an ubiquitous surveillance state, and FEMA stormtroopers surrounding dissidents into camps. Okay, and as we go further into this article, it actually speaks about people that worked with him that really felt that there was something amiss here. Okay, and this person here, Charlie Hubble, an actor who appeared in the Gray State trailer, told TwinCities.com that David Crowley seemed more grounded and focused than would lend itself to anything chaotic. The entire time I worked with him, there was nothing aggressive or chaotic or strange or abnormal. He was one of the ones I was hanging my hat on, one who was going to succeed, Hubble said. While preliminary reports state that Crowley resorted to a murder-suicide after months of depression and isolation, other observers believe he was killed by the very system his movie was opposing. And I tend to agree with that. I really believe that he got a little too close for comfort. This whole murder-suicide and depression thing, I believe, is just a cover story for what really happened with, with this murder or this horrible murder-suicide. I believe that he was most likely taken down by the establishment. Even All News Pipeline has an article as well about this, talking about the director found dead. He was trying to write a movie about martial law and FEMA camps. Okay, was another watchman brought down, and it says writer-director of the controversial police state martial law movie Gray State has been found dead in an apparent murder-suicide along with his wife and 5-year-old daughter, according to this breaking news story. And there's a guy talking about David Crowley, and the thing that I find interesting is that why would a man who is trying to expose the New World Order, trying to expose the FEMA and the martial law agenda, all of a sudden just do this to his own wife and to his own children, to his own child? It doesn't really make any sense. And this is an article saying, with the Watchmen and U.S. Patriot veterans now under what appears to be a well-coordinated assault to silence them, were the deaths of Crowley and his wife and child another such move by a New World Order now desperate to continue their long-held paths? Now, I believe that David Crowley was part of the U.S. Army in some way. Possibly he had some inside information and he was trying to expose that. And of course, he got killed for doing that. And as you go through the article, you'll see videos and other things that you can look into. But it's just really, really interesting and sad, really, what has happened here. But at the same time, I believe we are being prepared for what is about to happen. And all these false flags, I believe, are harbingers for what David Crowley was trying to expose. And I found some great articles on Your Newswire. This one about the event that happened in in France, actually, just recently. False flag terror attack in France sees harsh military rules imposed. And I found this extremely interesting because it says the terror attack in Nice, France, could not have come at a more auspicious time for the deeply unpopular President Hollande and his embattled government, leading many to believe this was a false flag government-orchestrated attack. The government and authorities have been struggling to control a citizen uprising for the past 3 months, and now they can impose more state of emergency measures, call up military operational services, and justify clamping down on any dissidents to thwart the uprising movement. Not long before the attack happened, French President Hollande said the national state of emergency was to be lifted, so it seemed like a strange coincidence for an event to appear right away on Bastille Day, the country's national day celebrating the French Revolution in 1789, allowing the state of emergency to be immediately reinstated, the current revolution to be thwarted, and the New World Order's march to an authoritarian one-world government to continue unimpeded. So that's what's real interesting, is that the fact that the particular day, the actual day that the state of emergency measures were to be lifted after the Paris attacks last November, then all of a sudden this other attack happens with this psychopath driving a truck over people, and it happens to be on the same day that they were going to lift the state of emergency measures, but of course they brought it all back. It was reinstated because of what happened. Okay, so something is definitely going on here. All right. It goes on to say, why is France getting attacked? It all started after France said they were going to recognize Palestine as a state. Then they started getting odd terror events which are used to demonize Muslims. The same happened with Belgium after they started moving in the same direction. Norway also had a mass killing after they sided with Palestine. A pro-Palestine and anti-Israel political youth organization was attacked, leaving 77 dead. In October 2014, France's foreign minister said France would recognize a Palestinian state even if peace talks with Israel fails. And of course, in November 2017, we had the Paris attacks. In Belgium, the parties of the new center-right government agreed to recognize Palestine as a state. The Chamber of Representatives adopted a resolution in favor of this motion in 2015. Then we had the 2016 Brussels bombings. Then the same thing with Norway, they also did the same thing, and then they had the attacks in 2011, but in 2010, December 2010, they were also agreeing to this. So we can see, I believe, what is going on here. The people of France have been bravely rising up against their elite ruling class for the last 3 months. Then on Bastille Day, the day the French celebrate their ancestors rising up and overthrowing the elites, the current New World Order aligned government performed an inside job designed to save their skins and thwart the new French Revolution. So this is what could be possibly happening, that the New World Order is scared and they are causing more attacks. They do not want to lose their power. Another article on Newswire, this is from July the 13th. The other one was from July the 15th, talking about the false flag in Nice. But this was about basically another event that happened near the Eiffel Tower during the Euro 2016 finale at the Stade de France in Paris. It shows a nationalist spectacle on a giant screen, blinding people to what is happening on the streets. Police and paramilitary operating as servants of the ruling class working against ordinary people keep protesters at bay with tear gas and a water cannon. Okay, so there is literally anarchy on the streets of France, and the mainstream media continues to collude with the establishment to cover up the scale of events and suppress a night on our feet. And it's called the Nuit debout. Okay, this is what's really going on in France. All-out chaos, violence on the fringe of massive street marches has coalesced with other anti-establishment acts, which government spokesman Stéphane Le Foll acknowledged 30 government buildings have been attacked in recent weeks, including one sprayed with gunfire. Okay, so there's violence going on in France. People are protesting. They are really coming against what the government is doing. Okay, and I believe that the people are trying to speak. They're trying to show that they need their government to do the right thing. All right, you can keep seeing the photos as we press on. It says humanity, tolerance, and respect. That is exactly what the people are asking of their government. The people are rising up, demanding the abolishment of authoritarian laws designed to enrich the elite at the expense of ordinary people. They are asking for elected officials to be held accountable and democracy to live up to its promise. And it makes sense why people are rioting. There are so many corrupt things the governments are doing. This new world order is really being exposed, and people are really rising up, it seems, really in France. And, I don't believe this is being covered at all by the mainstream media. All right, and then if we go to what took place in Turkey, there's an article here that I found by Michael Snyder on his Economic Collapse blog. Now, I don't really agree with a lot of his eschatological views on end-time events, but he's really good at covering the economy and the other world events in general. But he has some great information about the fact that this coup was staged in Turkey, and it's been used to purge 50,000 or more teachers, judges, soldiers, and government officials. Okay, and it says that Barack Obama's friend in Turkey is a deeply corrupt, radical Islamist dictator that has just staged a coup to consolidate his grip on power. As I previously reported, 1,845 journalists, writers, and critics have been arrested for insulting President Erdogan over just the past 2 years. And a couple of years ago, he had a monstrous 1,100-room presidential palace built for himself that is 30 times larger than the White House. With each passing day, more evidence emerges, which seems to indicate that the recent coup was a staged event meant to enable Erdogan and his allies to eliminate their enemies and solidify their stranglehold over the nation. At this point, the number of victims of Erdogan's purge has hit 50,000, but the final number will not be known for quite some time. Okay, and he's saying that, people can say that maybe this wasn't staged, but what's interesting is as among the questions being asked why coup plotters didn't execute the most basic steps in seizing power, like securing Erdogan and other top officials, not a single member of his cabinet and inner circle AKP party leadership was detained. Nor did coup plotters effectively take control of TV, radio, and internet outlets. The government TRT station and CNN Turk were for a time occupied by alleged coup plotters who quickly retreated as it fell apart. Okay, so this is most likely the worst coup ever. It definitely seems like it was staged. There were definitely major things that they should have, taken care of, but they didn't. Coup plotters also failed to secure most airports and other transportation hubs. They didn't occupy or attack Erdogan's $600 million presidential palace and failed to intercept his plane before, during, or after he flew from one of the country's busiest and most accessible airports back to Istanbul. This despite the supposed active participation of top generals in Turkey's Air Force, which maintains a fleet of F-16 aircraft easily capable of tracking, intercepting, or, if it came down to it, shooting down Erdogan's plane. So, nothing really, came of this coup. It was pretty lame. They didn't really do anything. It didn't accomplish anything. So that's why it seems like this could be, a false flag. So much about this supposed coup absolutely stinks, and that includes the fact that lists of judges, teachers, soldiers, and government officials to be rounded up after the coup appear to have been prepared ahead of time. This is so obvious that even the EU commissioner in charge of Turkey's membership bid has commented saying it looks like at least if something has been prepared. The lists are available, which indicates it was prepared and to be used at a certain stage. I'm very concerned. It is exactly what we... So far, at least 50,000 people have been rounded up or stripped of their positions since the coup. The following breakdown of the purge comes from BBC. 6,000 military personnel have been arrested, with more than 24 generals awaiting trial. Nearly 9,000 police officers have been sacked. Close to 3,000 judges have been suspended. Some 1,500 employees of Turkey's finance ministry have been dismissed. 492 have been fired from the Religious Affairs Directorate. More than 250 staff have been removed. Okay, not just that, there are 15,200 education workers and 1,500 something university deans that were just sacked. Okay, so it seems like while Turkey's press is already mostly under Erdogan's control, it is the educational witch hunt followed that is far more troubling. And just as expected, over the past hour, we have gotten a glimpse of just how extensive the Turkish's president cleansing of secular society will be when the state-run Anadolu news agency reported that Turkey's Ministry of Education has sacked 15,200 personnel for alleged involvement with the group the government claims is responsible for Friday's failed coup. Even more shocking, Anadolu reports that Turkey's Board of Higher Education has requested the resignations of all 1,577 university deans, effectively dismissing them. Okay, so again, we can see what is going on. 21,000 teachers, have been also taken out. So in one fell swoop, Erdogan is eliminating as much institutional opposition to his leadership as he possibly can. And not only is he stripping them of their jobs and arresting many of them, CNN is reporting that he actually wants to push for the death penalty for anyone that has any connection to treason. Okay, so again, we can see, I believe, what is going on here. I believe that this coup was used for none other than to give Erdogan more power, to take out the people that he felt are a threat to his regime, because he wants to restore the Ottoman Empire. He wants to restore the caliphate. And, Turkey is actually quite a fairly secular or very liberal society, and he wants to change all that. And I believe this coup has most likely been staged for the sake of that very thing. Okay, and, as we keep going here, many people are talking about this Executive Order 13603 and how dangerous it is. Now, this was, of course, done by President Obama back in March of 2012. The purpose is to delegate authority and addresses national defense resource policies and programs under the Defense Production Act of 1950. It provides a framework and authority for the allocation or appropriation of resources, materials, and services to promote national defense. But what is real interesting is that this executive order includes all of Obama's out-of-control agencies, and they would have unlimited power if the president declared a national emergency. Okay, so this order is called the National Defense Resource Preparedness, allows the government to completely control our lives through the industrial and technological base should the president declare a national emergency. EO 13603 gives Obama the power over all commodities and products capable of being ingested by human beings and animals, all forms of energy, all forms of civil transportation, all usable water from all sources, health resources, forces, labor such as military conscription, and federal officials can use regulations to prioritize and allocate resources. Okay, so this is a plan to control our economy, our lives in the event of a crisis, endangering our national security. There are no checks and balances written into this executive order. So this gives Obama absolute power and control. And, if you click on this link, you will go right to the whitehouse.gov website, which shows exactly this executive order signed on March 16, 2012. So you can go to that. I will leave links for these articles. But really, again, New World Order style executive orders that are being signed by Obama, New World Order style coup that has happened in Turkey, New World Order style false flags that are happening in France and continue to happen seemingly on a regular basis. So really, this whole thing that this director of, this movie Gray State seems to be coming to pass, he was definitely onto something. Another thing I want to talk about is good old George Soros, again from Your News Wire, and he seems to be behind the Black Lives Matter, the BLM movement. Black Lives Matter leader DeRay McKesson claims to be leading a grassroots revolution for racial and economic justice, but it can be revealed that he has close connections with the privileged and is funded by George Soros and the elite for the purpose of inciting terror and furthering their agenda for civil war and the disarmament of civilians. Okay, so that's what I believe is really taking place here. Soros has several connections to the BLM organizers and activists. According to Politico, the Soros-funded group, the Democracy Alliance, donated to several race-based movements, organizations that ally with the BLM movement. Many of Soros' groups have provided funding and guidance to the BLM movement and affiliated organizations, with the billionaire investing $33 million in BLM alone. Okay, again, this man is one of the elites. He is definitely causing a lot of these false flags and is behind the funding of many of these things that is going on. I got another article here from Breitbart talking about Soros admits involvement in migrant crisis. National borders are the obstacle. And it's such a horrible thing to say. Why would national borders be an obstacle? You would think that people want to protect their countries, but billionaire George Soros has confirmed he wants to bring down Europe's borders following the accusation made last week by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Last week, Mr. Orban accused Mr. Soros, who was born in Hungary, of deliberately encouraging the migrant crisis. This invasion is driven on the one hand by people smugglers and on the other by those human rights activists who support everything that weakens the nation state. Okay, that is key there. Weakens the nation state. There's even a reference in the word that says that Lucifer weakens the nations. This Western mindset and this activist network is perhaps best represented by George Soros. Mr. Soros has now issued an email statement to Bloomberg Business claiming his foundations help uphold European values, while Mr. Orban's action is strengthening the Hungarian border and stopping a huge migrant influx, undermining those values. His plan treats the protection of national borders as the objective and the refugees as an obstacle, Soros added. Our plan treats the protection of refugees as the objective and national borders as the obstacle. So really, this is to me all code for the fact that Soros is, one of the people behind, trying to collapse the borders, trying to bring in one world government, one world union, and he is definitely one of the elite that are behind what is going on. And of course, another big player in this whole thing is none other than Pope Francis. I love the fact that he really mangled Matthew 28 recently to confuse the masses. And in this article from Charisma News, it talks about how, it's important to clearly see in the midst of the incredible amount of cultural confusion today, especially when faith leaders like the Pope make statements that leave many of the faithful scratching their heads. Last week, the Pope invited this particular person, a high-ranking, imam, to the Vatican. He's a highest figure in Sunni Islam. Okay, and when it comes to the civil discourse, a meeting like this can accomplish good things. But when it comes to Christian doctrine, a meeting like this can confuse the masses unless there is abundant clarity, which the Pope did not offer. Not only was Pope Francis not clear, he even twisted the meaning of Scripture to relegate Christ's Great Commission in Matthew 28 down to Islam's command of conquest. In his words, it is true that the idea of conquest is inherent in the soul of Islam. However, it is also possible to interpret the objective in Matthew's Gospel, where Jesus sends his disciples to all nations, in terms of the same idea of conquest. And the writer says, seriously, this is an absolute absurd statement. Here's how simple this is to clarify. Islam, in its truest form, according to the Quran, is a political conquest that forces belief and prevents individual freedom. Just look at Muslim-dominated countries where Sharia law is in effect, and you'll see the result. Women and gays don't abode well there. But in Christianity, on the other hand, is a spiritual conquest that invites belief and promotes individual freedom. A simple look at history in Europe and America revealed the results of this. Unfortunately, both have abandoned Christianity's true biblical roots. Okay, so really we can see how the Pope is twisting what, the Great Commission is. He is coming to say that these jihadists are basically similar to going into all the world and preaching the gospel, which is definitely a perversion of what Christ said. This Pope to me is nothing but a deceiver, and even though many people come against me and saying that we shouldn't say anything about the Pope, really we need to expose him. The Word of God says in Ephesians that we need to expose the works of darkness and show people what is going on. And I will continue to speak out on this Pope. He is a deceiver, and he is not to be trusted, and he is completely twisting what the Word of God says. This Pope, if he truly loves Christ, he needs to check his Bible and study his Bible all over again from scratch, because he is truly not getting it. Okay, and as we keep going, I found this article also on Christian News, which was, disturbing to me, but it talked about 11 dangerous signs, that are being spotted in America. And the sad fact is that he's talking about the average American citizen is virtually unaware of the danger that now lurks. I would say the same thing for Canadian citizens. There are many people who are just unaware of what is going on. They are busy enjoying life, being entertained, working their jobs to make ends meet, and so on. Even when disaster or tragedy strikes, most people quickly return to their status quo life, and soon all is forgotten. And with disasters and tragedies now filling daily headlines and becoming more common, the desensitizing of our hearts becomes the placebo that convinces us that these things will soon stop and could never happen to most of us. And the reality is that underneath every tragedy, bizarre event, and census act is a global agenda to lead us into World War III and bring about the one world order. If this sounds like a far-fetched conspiracy theory, consider the following. Historians, political scientists, and analysts from the US, England, Canada, Russia, Germany, and Australia are telling us that the same chain of crisis and pattern of events that led to World War I and II are happening right now. There is a deliberate global movement to implode economies, to set world depressions in motion, and policies to collapse third world nations. The most Stone Age barbaric groups are being granted political power. That's definitely happening. Borders are being opened to bankrupt our economies and flatten our social welfare programs. Exactly how we've been talking about George Soros and all the things that he is funding. The globalist agenda is first to cause collapse of our political and socio-economic systems, and then to take control and bring in total tyranny, even waging war on nation states who are working to stabilize their economies. Led by billionaires like George Soros and others, they actually fund crises such as the Arab Spring, the flow of jihadists into Europe, assisting the migration of illegal immigrants with those with diseases such as refugees into our societies. Right now, there is a major U.S. and Chinese fleets lining up against each other in Chinese waters, with the communist Chinese president preparing his troops for World War III. There are reports that Turkey President Erdogan is being backed by jihadists and not his own army. If true, this has immense ramifications, as Turkey is considered the gateway into Europe. Vladimir Putin of Russia is also preparing for nuclear war and warning journalists and begging for global debate as the media remains silent, or I should say worldwide debate. I do not like that word global. From Venezuela to Nigeria, world governments are going bankrupt, while the Pentagon reports that this is the most dangerous time in our history. All this is happening while our own enemy of the state, Obama, reports that the world is as safe as it has ever been, and the economy is best as it has ever been. So basically, Obama's view of this is go back to sleep. Don't worry, nothing to see here. But really, all of us as world citizens, we need to really wake up and realize what is happening. We cannot just go about living our lives and not take notice. Even Yeshua himself says in Matthew 24 to see to it that we are not deceived, that he gave us clearly the signs of the times, and nation would rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There would be rumors, wars and rumors of wars. There would be famines, pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places, and all of these signs are all evident right now as we speak. So even though it is a crazy time to live in, it is also an exciting time to live in, because the return of Yeshua is at hand, and we as Christians need to wake up and realize what is truly going on. We need to realize the hour that we are in. And this reminds me of the Hunger Games movie. I know I've spoken about the Hunger Games many times. It's obviously one of my favorite movies, but so much is shown in this movie. as we've been talking about this gray state that is definitely arising, this police state, martial law. This was depicted very well in these Hunger Games movies. You can see again the stormtroopers, as one of the articles was talking about, as Hunger Games is filled with these troopers that are all over the place, or the peacekeepers, or whatever you want to call them. You've got Katniss and Peeta, and I can't remember what his name was, or Haymitch, that was being led here, but see how they're all wearing the same things, only wearing gray kind of clothing. Okay, a very solemn kind of, gathering that these people are allowed to have. As we look even at the reaping, we can see everybody pretty much wearing the same thing, gray and white. And, people really aren't allowed much rights at all in this movie. They are totally controlled by President Stone, by the elite, basically by the New World Order, who all live in the capital. They enjoy all the benefits, and their stormtroopers and their police state control everything. People are starving, and the elites have everything. Okay, so this is what I believe is coming very, very soon. This Pan Am, I believe, is what North America, including possibly Mexico, is going to look like very soon. Pan Am, I believe, will be the super state of Canada, USA, and Mexico. In fact, we've already seen that the NALS 2016, they were talking about this. Obama was talking about the fact that there is already an international, economy in place, and I believe he was also alluding to the fact that the New World Order is pretty much rising and is already in place and is coming very soon in its fullness. And so Pan Am, as they showed in Hunger Games in the different districts, I believe is coming very soon to North America, including Mexico. I believe it's going to cover all of Canada, USA, and Mexico. This Pan Am is maybe, I'm not sure whether that will even be the name of what they will call this super state, but this is what is coming. And, I found it real interesting that really all of these world religions, to me, are being controlled by the Illuminati. And I found a great article from Before It's News talking about the Illuminati Grand Master saying that we control Islam and we'll use it to destroy the West. And that is what I believe is truly going on here, that Islam is really a scapegoat. They do not care for Muslims. They do not care for Hindus. They do not care for Buddhists. They do not care for Christians, of course. They do not care for the Jews. They only care about bringing in Lucifer. That is what they want. And in this documentary short, we discuss Albert Pike's 3 World War predictions. There are websites with this information. However, I believe the most important aspect of the predictions is that the Illuminati is using Islam to accomplish its goals. Albert Pike openly stated that Islam will be the central component in a war against the West, and that the Illuminati will lead Islam into direct confrontation with the West. We have already seen what the New World Order has done with Islam, and that is to foment a crisis and watch as Brussels, Belgium, and France, Paris attacks happen. But it's all been planned, setting the stage for World War III, just as they set the stage for World War I and World War II. And I really tend to agree with that, because really, before 9/11, 2001, I really didn't hear much about Islam at all. But all of a sudden, after 9/11, we hear Islam constantly in the news. We've got, Al-Qaeda that they came up with, the Taliban that I believe they came up with, all creations, I believe, of the Illuminati, of the CIA, the FBI. They've created all these things that the elite have done. These terrorist groups are doing the elite's bidding, and they are using Islam to forward an agenda. And that agenda is this. Of course, this is good old Albert Pike, a picture of him, one of the grand masters of the Illuminati. This is the purpose. After Islam is used for its purpose, it will be done away with to make way for the religious system of pure Luciferianism. All Muslims will partake in the new system and worship Lucifer. And not just all Muslims. They want all people to do this. Okay, and there are videos here that you can check out talking about Albert Pike and the plans of the Illuminati, who want to bring World War III in order to bring in their Luciferian New World Order. That's what I believe is going on here. And we need to be aware of what is happening with these things, and that Islam, there are many, peace-loving Muslims. I'm not saying that all Muslims are doing this, but they are using Islam to forward an agenda so that they can bring a war against all religions, so that they can criminalize, I believe, all believers of Yeshua. I believe that dark days are ahead for the church, and, I honestly believe that the church is going to be taken out before the final 7-year tribulation period. But before that day comes, we do not know exactly when that 7 years is going to start. But before that day, I believe the church is going to go through some terrible times, and we need to be prepared for what is going on. And this man, David Crowley, see his beautiful family, his daughter, his wife, even his little dog. He had a beautiful family, and I fully believe that he was murdered by the establishment because he was exposing their agenda. He was showing what was coming. He had some inside information, I believe, if he was part of the army at some point in his life. But I believe he was trying to expose the agenda of the elites as to what is coming. This movie, Gray State, the trailer that you saw at the beginning of this video, I believe is depicting just that. And even in another video that I covered, some time ago about the Purge, they constantly show this whole guillotine imagery. And we know that in the book of Revelation, it speaks of how people, Christians, will be beheaded if they do not follow Antichrist. It's, I believe, not even Christians. Anyone who does not follow the New World Order, who does not follow the Luciferian Antichrist figure who is coming, they will be beheaded. Of course, this movie shows the Luciferian imagery, the double X, the sign of the Illuminati, the crossing, the House of Baal, the 1010, 33 backwards if you go backwards from ZYX. So again, this is what I believe is being shown in this movie. And what I found really interesting, another inspiration for this video, the third inspiration, was a video that I saw recently by Irvana. I encourage you to check out her channel and subscribe to her. She's got some great information. And she also speaks of this trailer from Gray State. And in the trailer that you saw also at the beginning of this video, there is a character who basically is an executioner dressed up in all white. And, as you look closely at this executioner, he is wearing a certain apron. Of course, there's the guillotine, just like we saw in the Purge movie, that they are using to basically just to kill people. But here also in this Gray State movie, they show an executioner, basically killing people with the guillotine. And what's real interesting is that she pointed out that there's this particular apron is being worn by this person, and people who don't really know what is going on or don't really, aren't really looking closely, they probably would not even realize what this is. And if we go a little bit more into this, I can show you a little close-up of this apron. Can you see what is there? I believe this is showing the Masonic apron. Now, even the Google, the Gmail logo is the same. This is, I guess, a little exposure of the Gmail logo. We know what Google's about already, but you can see here the Masonic apron with the all-seeing eye. You've got the compass and the square, the primary logo of the Masons of the Illuminati, and I believe that is exactly what is here. You've got, again, of course, the M, okay, of this apron, and you've got the all-seeing eye right there, and you've got the compass and the square right there. So I believe that is what this is showing right here in this movie, even in the trailer, that it is none other than the Illuminati who are behind this. Even as we saw in this article, that it is the Illuminati that is in control. They are controlling Islam. They are using this, radical Islam to forward their agenda. And this is being shown right even in this trailer, that it is the Masons, the Illuminati, that is behind all these false flag events. They are the ones that want to bring in martial law, and they are the ones that are building this kingdom of theirs. And, I found it even more interesting that 30,000 guillotines, 800 FEMA camps, and 15,000 Russian troops. What's going on? This apparently there is a code right in the Obamacare program that actually talks about execution by guillotine, or actually authorizes legal, execution. All right, I will leave links again to these things, but this specific code will make any American's hair stand up on the back of their neck. This code, ICD 9E978. After reading this code, I decided that it was my duty to investigate further and get to the bottom of why we have this medical code in the United States for legal executions. The Jesuits are behind most conspiracies, and this one is no different. Okay, so basically this is authorizing execution by guillotine. Okay, and then they have videos down here speaking about this kind of thing. Okay, so, this is pretty crazy that there are guillotines supposedly already in the United States, that there are 30,000 of them possibly, and I believe this is getting ready to basically take care of Christians. There was another blog that I found, this Dion versus the Earth. He speaks about how the U.S. is going to push ahead to behead criminals. All right, and this, again, this code E978, again, the same code in the Obamacare, ICD 9E978. This is an international code for beheading by decapitation, okay, and many other ways. It's basically a code for capital punishment. You can do it in many other different ways, but this is for beheading by guillotine. Okay, so a few years ago, we wrote an article that alerted our readers that thousands of new ICD, international classifications of disease codes, have been covertly placed in the popular piece of legislation known as Obamacare. Although there were thousands of new ICD codes implemented under Obamacare, one of the most shocking is ICD 9E78, which is code for legal execution. Okay, ICD 9, code E978, approves decapitation as a legal form of execution in America, although most Americans don't know this. And I'm sure, again, this is also going to come to Canada. Although the fact that the United States is considering decapitation as a primary means for execution may not bother some, it is moving America one step closer to the rumors we have been hearing for years. Suddenly, the FEMA camps and guillotines make perfect sense. If the law concedes that it is okay to execute criminals by means of decapitation, the next question to ask is, what constitutes a criminal? A very good question. And could that definition be changed under any circumstance, say martial law, outbreak, civil unrest? Okay, so what's real interesting is that, they could consider anyone, even a terrorist, I guess, a criminal, and they could go to the guillotine. And I believe this is exactly what we were shown in this movie. I believe this is the real reason why Gray State, the writer and producer of this movie, was killed by the establishment. He was getting way too close to exposing who is behind the false flags, who is behind the New World Order, who will be killing Christians and other people they deem as criminals when the New World Order regime truly rises up, which I believe we are seeing the beginnings of that. This is all fomenting to come together for World War III. This is what they want to do. They want to bring in their New World Order. They want to bring this in, and they are causing World War III through these false flags. Definitely something big is coming. They want their final New World Order to come very soon. And I think this movie is clearly showing that, this is going to be a reality. It's the fact that Obama has signed executive orders that gives him the power to control every resource in the country to enslave people. I believe that is exactly what is coming, that the Illuminati, the New World Order, is definitely rising up. But thankfully, we have hope, because this kingdom of the Illuminati is going to come to an end one day, because Daniel chapter 2 says that a stone was cut without hands, which struck the image upon its feet, which were of iron and clay, and broke them to pieces. Now this image stands for all the world kingdoms, the gold being Babylon, the silver arms and chests being Medo-Persians, the bronze being Greece, the leg of irons being Rome, and the feet and the 10 toes being mingled of iron and clay, I believe, is the final New World Order system that is coming very soon. But this is going to be broken. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were broken to pieces together. They became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away, so that no place was found for them. And that stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. That stone is the cornerstone, the chief cornerstone, none other than Yeshua HaMashiach. He is coming to destroy the kingdoms of this world. He will set up his millennial reign. All nations, all people will bow down to the name of Jesus Christ, the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach. That is our hope. We need to look to that. We need to also be prepared for hardships, for trials, for tribulations, for we are going to go through some dark times. I fully believe that before the final 7 years, the worst 7 years of human history, the true followers of Yeshua will be taken before that happens. But up until that time, we need to stand strong. We need to keep the faith. We need to keep preaching the truth and telling people and exposing the agenda of the New World Order, so they can see that the Bible has already clearly spoken about this, that the Bible has prophesied this, just as we said in a previous video, that only God, Yahweh the Father, can give prophecy, can speak the future, because he knows the end from the beginning. And we need to point people to the truth of the Bible, of the word of Yahweh, to show them that all these things have been prophesied, have been foretold. These things are going to happen, and we as Christians, as Bible-believing Christians, have the answers by the word of Yahweh. So I pray for you. Keep strong, stay safe, and thank you for considering this information. Thank you for watching, and I pray that you have a great weekend and that you keep standing strong in the faith, for Yeshua, our King, is coming very soon. God bless you.
Gary, why don't we fix the grid?
Exactly.
All right, I'm not going to ask Steve Quayle because he'll tell me. But No.
Gary, I don't want to.
No, I'm going to ask you, and then Steve, you can come
but
next.
Jim,
okay?
I don't want to answer his question for him right now, but I thought of this, I think in the middle of the night, a few hours of sleep by design.
Yeah,
Wow.
you're right. That's a term that I'm intimately familiar with. You know,
I don't get it.
I like to say by design. Why are they not protecting the grid? Is it incompetence?
Oh, God, that's really bad.
Yeah.
The interpretation of that tongues was pretty wild.
Yeah.
Say it again. Explain it.
Is it by design?
Does somebody
Or is it by
want our
incompetence?
nation to go down?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I just heard Steve Quayle yell very loud, yes. What do you mean by that? Surely nobody wants our country to go down.
Here is the issue. The issue, ladies and gentlemen, is that everything is designed to overwhelm us at one time with all the different crises. That way they keep us in a state or a condition of pretty much perpetual worry, perpetual concern, and the whole idea of the communist takeover of the United States is coming to pass right before our eyes. And it's to overwhelm the system. And, you know, it's tragic, Zach. It's tragic, Jim. It's that by design, they want to use anything they have at their disposal when the time comes. And we were talking earlier in the meeting, and Gary ran through the executive order. So it's like they're generating their own situation by which they can control all variables. And Jim, is it okay to have him run through the executive order? Because you were blown away by that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. The executive order we're talking about is 13603. I'm sure that'll be on your screen. I want you to go online and pull it up and look at it. An executive order is the privilege of a president to simply write into law a policy. And in effect, it's legislation. And when you look at what Obama did with the Executive Order 13603 a few years ago, you will be astounded. Because what it allows him to do is to declare an emergency for any reason, economic, otherwise, without the approval of Congress. So he literally has dictatorial power. Now, when he declares an emergency, what happens? And again, in this executive order, first of all, the government acquires absolute ownership of all resources, of all oil and gas, of all food, of all money. They even have the opportunity at their discretion to draft you into a civilian workforce without compensation. Now, there's a word for that: slavery. Obama signed an executive order that gives him the right to enslave the American people if he decides to declare an emergency for any reason. Now, that sounds wild and crazy.
I don't want to be a slave.
Ladies and gentlemen, you need to do a little homework. Google this and read it for yourself.
Are you sure about this?
It's astounding.
How come I don't know about this? I must be living in a cave or something. That's horrible. That can't even be. Not in the United States of America.
This is no longer the United States of America that you know. Most people, and let me just say this, most people don't understand that everything you think the country was and still is no longer. We don't have the guarantees, and the last thing they'll go for is the guns. But the executive order, it literally means that you are absolutely at the mercy of the government, and it's women too. And what's tragic is they'll break up families and separate the kids. You know, it's no fun to tell the truth sometimes because the ramifications are so great. But the executive orders basically put us, even on levels that some of the dictatorships around the world, that some of these guys like Stalin and Hitler should be, you know, proud, because that's the policies they're following. So the executive orders are a matter of law and implementation. And that's why you've watched the U.S. military be destroyed. That's why the veterans in this country are being destroyed. And the whole purpose is to basically implement whatever crisis they want at whatever time and be able to take over everything. And somebody said, well, they're coming for my stuff. I said, no, they're coming for your life. And that's what people can't focus because of normalcy bias. And normalcy bias simply means this: the human brain cannot entertain such drastic interruption of that which they feel they're in control of in their own life. Wow. In essence, none of us are in control at that point. So Gary and I were talking earlier, and I want to share something. When I heard that Hillary was going to walk, okay, I got physically sick. And I just started weeping inside. And God said, go to Isaiah 6. Isaiah 6:1. I'll quote the first verse for you. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, and he was high and lifted up, and his presence, the train filled the temple. And here's what the Lord, and I want everybody to pray about it. You've got to understand that the only thing that's going to keep us in this hour is the power, the presence, and the promises of God, and our recognizing the lateness of the hour. And Jesus warned us of all these things. All prophecy, the testimony of Jesus Christ is the spirit of prophecy. So this is where we're at. And I challenge you, I challenge everyone that's in going to see this on television to take it to the Lord in prayer, because that struck me to the heart.